Hello everyone, it's Monday the 23rd of November and welcome to episode 96 of the Meet the Farmers podcast. I'm your host Ben Eagle. We're going to dive straight into our feature interview today and we're heading to the Fens. Last week I spoke to Cambridgeshire arable farmer Tom Clarke.
It's Farmer Focus.
This evening I am heading to the Cambridgeshire Fens near Ely to speak to arable farmer Tom Clarke, who farms approximately 1,000 acres of milling wheat, sugar beet, potatoes and other crops including linseed. Tom is the fourth generation of his family to farm in the area. As we'll see tonight, he had a career away from farming first before throwing himself in wholeheartedly to agriculture. On top of the farm itself, he sits on his local internal drainage boards, he's on the NFU Sugar Board, and he also sits on the NFU's 2040 Net Zero Steering Group. Along with 22 of his other neighbours, he's also part of the Ely Nature Friendly Farming Zone, which seeks to share knowledge about farming alongside supporting wildlife and informing the public about that work. Tom, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for even wanting me on. I'm very privileged. Thank you.
Not
You've done
at
your
all.
research as well. I'm really worried now. You know everything. I should be asking you the questions.
I have to say, it's amazing what the internet can delve up. Don't worry though. Can you start by telling us a bit about your part of the Fens? How would you sell the area if you were the local tourist board?
Wow. I wouldn't start off very well because I would say it's really flat. And, you know, a lot of people drive through it and don't look sideways and just have the impression that it's all flat and boring. And, you know, it's quite man-made landscape. It's all 2 meters below sea level. Yep. It's very flat, as I say, and it's pretty. I guess if you're expecting your average pudding bowl hills and sort of bucolic fantasy of farming, then this is about as far away from that as you can get. But then there is a big but. I think there's a really strong beauty. If you like horizontal, we've got loads of horizontal. There's nothing in the way. You get massive big skies. Yeah. You get light coming in from actually our village where the farm is all around the village. And there's an awful lot of artists who have actually moved here. Yep. Because apparently the light is fantastic for painting, and there is beauty in that flat, boring landscape. So don't let you tell anybody different.
So you're a fourth generation farmer, but I know that you didn't go into farming straight away. So I'm interested to know, did you want to be a farmer when you were growing up?
It's a trick. People always ask me this question. And yes, my dad was a farmer, and his dad had been farmers. But we didn't grow up on the farm. As I say, the fen is all old bog, old marsh, and it's not very stable. And when my great-grandfather and mother started the farm, the house that they lived on the farm fell down.
Wow.
And they decided, you know, let's not try that again. And they bought a house in Ely, in the town nearby to the farm, so 4 miles away. And that has been, if you like, the farmhouse. And so that's where I grew up. That's where I have always lived before I moved out of home. And my mum didn't farm. My mum wasn't a farmer's wife. She actually ran a ladies' underwear shop.
Okay.
in the city, in town, Ely. And no one ever asked me, you know, when you were growing up, did you want to run an underwear shop?
I can say, could we talk about that instead?
I'm not sure I've got a lot. I mean, I spent some of my formative years looking at ladies' underwear, but I'm not sure it's broadcastable particularly. But so I was. It's a great privilege in a way because I was given the opportunity of a blank sheet of paper. It wasn't. It's quite a large farm for where we farm, and Dad had, you know, I think when I was growing up there was about 15, 16 people working on the farm, and he was managing it, if you like, and he didn't need us there every day to help out. It wasn't like a small family farm. My dad was a farmer just like my friends at schools. Dads were doctors or accountants or policemen or whatever, and so it wasn't in my blood in that way. Certainly to start with. And my dad certainly didn't at the time say that he really, you know, was expecting us to do the same. He wanted us to do what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
I think he'd
Yeah.
been slightly forced into it, and he just didn't want to, make us feel like we had to.
Okay. Let's take a bit of a sidestep and talk about your soils, because
Okay.
as we've alluded to at the beginning, you've got good peaty, silty boys' land soils,
Girls' land.
or girls' land, or girls' land, which listeners in other parts of the country probably drool over. However, I'm assuming you also have erosion risk. Tell me about the benefits and the drawbacks of fenland soil.
So we are farming in heart of what they call the Black Fens. So the Fens is divided into two sections. The northern part, up by the Wash, is much more silty,
Okay.
and it's had marine deposition on it and sediment from the rivers and stuff. And that's really fertile too. But down in the south of the Fens, where we are, it's black, and it's black because it's grown from when the Fens were flooded with sphagnum moss and sedges and things like that, and it's almost pure organic matter. All our soils are about 30% organic matter,
Wow.
carbon, and
Wow.
they're deep. They're not as deep as they were, which we'll probably get onto, but
Yeah.
they're deep. That you can dig 2 or 3 foot down before you hit anything that isn't as black as coal dust. And it's flat, as I said before. It's drained out. It's completely pancake flat. So we don't have any slopes anywhere on the farm, really, apart from the sides of the ditches. So all the fields are separated not by hedges or banks or anything, but by ditches. And it's all underdrained and as you say, so it gives us a lot of options. We can grow pretty much anything, including a lot of weeds. So one of the things that makes the soil so black is the amount of weed seeds just sitting there waiting to grow.
Yeah.
So that is a slight drawback from having such good soils. There's got to be some balance there.
Yeah.
And as you say, when it gets dry as well, the wind can blow the soil, and it does blow away. I've heard people say sand blows away, but you wait till you see, fine peat blowing away. It's like a black sandstorm.
Wow.
So we take measures. We make sure that doesn't happen on our land. Not everyone around here does the same, and that is a huge issue. The other problem with such high organic matters, they're really good for buffering the soil and everything. They lack manganese, so we have to use a lot of manganese for the plants. The organic matter, so you'll read on if you've done your basis or whatever, and you read on herbicide labels or whatever, don't apply on organic, binds to organic matter. So we can't use residuals.
Yep.
So if you're thinking, you've just got your wheat and just bung on the pre-em or whatever, we don't use pre-ems. We can't use pre-ems. We only use contact plant protection products. So that does limit what we can grow as well. But these are small things, because you're right. We as I was saying to you before we started, we haven't finished drilling yet. It's middle of November now. And that's quite usual for us. We can carry on drilling right through to February. We don't. Sometimes it's a bit of a mess, but again, the soil is very forgiving. We can get away with murder, really.
Let's talk about your cropping. So you grow wheat, sugar beet, linseed, and you've got a joint venture potato operation with a neighbour. Has that always been your cropping selection?
More or less, yeah. It hasn't really changed a great deal. I think back in the olden days, my family, we were much more into market gardening around here. So there's a lot more asparagus and fen celery is quite a famous thing. It used to be. So, but since the war, it's been roughly 50% wheat, and that's kind of like the break crop between the other things we grow. So a lot of the money used to be in potatoes and carrots and sugar beet, root crops like that. So that's really what we've done, and we haven't changed massively. I did drop peas a while ago, but and brought on linseed, but generally that's hasn't changed massively.
Who does what on the farm? Because I know you employ one full-time tractor driver and tractor and telehandler operator, and a spray guy. and you're in charge of general operations. I mean, how big is the team?
It's a euphemism if ever I've heard
Not at
one.
all.
This is my office. I can maybe
This
be
is
found
where
behind
you
my
live.
desk. Yes. Yeah. No,
Listeners,
so
he
obviously,
hasn't left in 2 years.
so I don't do a lot of tractor work. Obviously, I never really learned how to drive a tractor. And when I first started on the farm, I made an effort. I did a little course and had to hitch trailers up and everything. I tried reversing trailers, and pretty much very quick. I mean, as we'll probably talk about, I took over quite suddenly on the farm, and the guys who have been here for years, and I tried reversing a trailer into a barn, and it was probably one of the most humiliating experiences of my whole life.
Life is about knowing
that.
what your skill set is and doing it well.
That is the key. So no, I don't do an awful lot of tractor work, and well, I can fill in if needed. But if that happens, that means something usually has gone wrong somewhere else.
Okay.
It's quite a desperate measure if I have to get into a tractor. So I've got 2 full-timers, and we split the tractor work between them. I've got I used to have 3, but the guy still lives on the farm. He's now a caretaker. He's always a hand. He's got the brain, he's got the experience.
Yeah.
I call him a caretaker, but really I'm using him for his brain, his memories, and his knowledge of what he's done on the farm before. And I have a bookkeeper who comes in and helps with the office work. And that's it, really. Okay. I don't have a farm manager. I don't have a foreman or anything like that. So all the planning, all the day-to-day working out what we're going to do, where it's going to go, what's the priority, if something goes wrong, what do we do instead? That's all me. Yep. And all the marketing and all the selling and crop choices and that's all me. I have an agronomist, an independent agronomist he's older than me, but he's been on the farm since he was 23.
Oh, wow.
Okay. I think. And so when I first started, he was an absolute boon because he just knew the history of every field, what the weed problems were, which I knew nothing about. Yep. So for about 5 or 6 years, I just followed him around like a little puppy every time he came to the farm, just soaking up all that sort of knowledge. And I never studied agriculture myself. I'd never been to agricultural college, and as I said, I didn't do a lot of it when I was growing up. So that was really what I learned about farming, is from the guys on the farm and from my agronomist and from obsessive reading and talking to neighbours and things like that.
Let's go back to your earlier pre-farming life. So you did a degree in economics and politics, and then you spent 4 years working across local government, media relations and policy making. Tell me about that time and what drew you to London in the first place.
Gosh, you've really done your research. I don't talk about this much.
It's all on your site. It's all on your website.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it is.
Well, it's all true. So yeah. So I did. I was very out of university. I mean, I did well at school. So university seemed like an obvious choice. And it was quite a toss-up at the time as to whether I did economics degree or a biology degree.
Okay.
And I thought economics was probably more useful. I mean, I was equally interested in both, and they're quite different ways to go. So then I got a place at University of Exeter, and I did my economics and politics degree. And the politics was really quite a new thing because I hadn't studied that at school. That was really very interesting. And I sort of, the common thing between biology and economics and politics, they're both about how the world works, what makes it tick.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where I was always coming from. And then having learned all the theory, you want to go out and put it into practice. But I spent 4 years of my life working in local government in London. It was just where I got a job. And I was a policy advisor, researcher, and I did media relations for a local council group, in Kingston upon Thames, so in the southwest of London. Yep. And it was very interesting. Well, I'm getting carried away, but it might not be interesting to everyone. It was a very interesting situation in that that council was what they call the hung council. So there was no political group. It was Lib Democrats, Labour and Conservatives, and none of them had a majority. Yep. So it was all very febrile and very political, and it was all about trying to work out what was going to work and what wasn't going to work, and communicating all of the intricate machinations in a way that the public could understand about what was going on. And I found that fascinating and totally absorbing. And by the end of 3 or 4 years, I'd realized I enjoyed it, but I didn't want that to be my whole life. So I knew that it was a time to take a decision to do something more. Because quite easily, that could have been a career path for me. I would have ended up being some sort of SPAD or something in the end. I looked ahead and I didn't want that for myself. So I took a left turn and I went to business school.
So that's when you did your MBA. Okay.
Yes, yeah. So I did it straight after. Well, so I've been about 4 or 5 years in that area, and I've done some work with newspapers as well. I've done a work experience, journalism, and things like that. So that took me then to MBA. I thought, well, if politics isn't where everything works from, and it's just a lot of infighting, bickering, point scoring, then maybe business, the world of business, and actually, that's how you change things in the world. That's how you understand how things work. So I went to business school in the UK and actually in the States as well. I was in North Carolina for a while at Duke University. And again, that was absolutely fascinating. Really learned a lot about the world and about what makes business tick, why business works, how it doesn't work, what they're trying to do to kid consumers to do stuff, and learning the difference between value creating businesses and value destroying businesses, and strategy and negotiation and all that sort of stuff. So from the MBA, I went off and decided, right, okay, I'm going to fix companies and organizations. I'm going to be a management consultant and basically be an organizational doctor. You go in and you work out what's not working or what's not right, if it's not going in the right direction, and you put together a plan to fix it. So I did that for about another 4 years, several different places. And I worked also with government then as well, because I had a background in local government. So sometimes I did consulting projects in Whitehall and in the third sector for charities as well, which was really interesting and good. And then my dear old dad, who'd been plugging away on the farm all that time, got diagnosed with cancer, and he died within 6 months. So then it was a decision about, well, what do I do then? My sister was doing a PhD and she was living in New Zealand. So it was really down to me to pick up the pieces, and I did. Some people say, well, why don't you just sell the farm? Maybe in retrospect, that would have been a good idea.
Yeah.
But I decided to do the opposite and just learn to be a farmer without any experience.
I mean, if it's okay, can we go back to that time and just paint a picture of what was going through your mind in terms of the farm, but also personally? I think were you around 30, 32, 33 then?
Yes, 33 years old, and just moved in. My girlfriend and I had just moved in together in London, my dad was diagnosed. Well, he'd been sick for a while. Not really sick. He had esophageal cancer. So he had a tumor growing in his esophagus, which meant he had trouble eating and swallowing. And he was a kind of a typical, I guess what you could characterize as a typical farmer. He was stubborn and he didn't want to go to the doctors. So he didn't tell the doctors anything. He hadn't been to the doctors, and he was getting slowly worse over a year. And he hadn't even told me and my sister. My mum phoned up one day and said, really worried about your dad. He's not eating. And my dad was a large man. He was, and I wasn't visiting probably as often as I should have done. And so I didn't realise that there was something as seriously wrong as there was. And he left it to the very last minute. I took a leave of absence from work, and I couldn't actually concentrate on what I was doing anymore once I knew that. And so I wasn't doing much good at work anyway. So I took a leave of absence and came back to my mum and dad's place, and was just trying to convince my dad to go to the doctors, basically.
Yeah.
And he eventually did. And they told him he had cancer on his 69th birthday. And he was dead within 5 months.
Wow. So you then spent a number of years learning on the job. You've already mentioned you're agronomist. If you could give your younger self some advice, knowing what you now know, what would it have been?
I think you still don't understand it. You might think you're getting somewhere, but you don't. There's always another layer, another level. Yeah, being cocky like I was, and having been, called into Whitehall to sort
Yeah,
out the Olympics or DEFRA or
yeah,
whatever it was.
yeah. It's only 1,000 acres in Cambridgeshire.
This
What's
is just
it?
another project. This is
Easy.
just another project. I'll find out what the main problem is. I'll get some recommendations down. We'll do that. It'll all go through. It'll be fine. No way. No, 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 no. That's not how it worked at all. And pretty soon. So one family has worked with every generation of my family. And they lived on or nearby the farm.
Yep.
And the guy that works for me now, his great grandfather worked with my great grandfather.
Wow.
And the other family who actually live on the farm, it was father and son. They both worked for me, and they'd been there for 20 years. They really knew what to do. My dad had a very different management style. He was very hands-on, quite micromanaging, and liked to be in charge and in control. Whereas even if I'd wanted to be like that, there's no way I would have actually known what I was talking about. So that was to coin a management consultant, quite a culture change. I was asking people what they thought. What do you think we should do here? And they were like, are you trying to trick me? If I say the wrong thing, am I going to get fired? So yeah, we have. They're all still with me. So 12 years on, we're all happily. So we found a way through, and I've fallen in love with farming. I fell in love with farming quite quick.
Let's talk about sugar beet, because I want to make the most of, as I said before we started recording, of having you on here. It's not something that we discuss a lot on the show, although we did talk about it in some depth way back in episode 38 with Kit Papworth when I went up to Norfolk. Yeah, great guys, Kit. So you were invited onto the NFU Sugar Board in 2018 and were duly elected. What do you think should be the priorities for sugar in the UK right now?
Right now, so this is November 2020.
This is November 2020, yes.
We are, I think it's not an exaggeration to say that we're in crisis. We have had possibly the worst yields in most of the beet growing area in living memory, even in the 1970s, which is when, so the big problem at the moment is a disease called virus yellows. It's like beet malaria. It's spread by aphids. The virus lives in their guts, and when they feed on the plants, it transmits to the beet, and it basically destroys chlorophyll. And basically, a sugar beet plant is a little factory that runs on air, water, and sunlight. And the more sunlight it hits it, the more sugar it puts into its roots. And if it doesn't have chlorophyll in the leaves, it can't do that. Just as an example, a grower just down the road from me here, who is an exceptionally good grower, doesn't just grow sugar beet, grows all sorts of veg crops, would normally expect yields of 85 tonnes a hectare, down to 35 tonnes.
Wow.
I mean, some people predicted that this might happen, and, you sort of take it all with a pinch of salt, but it's as bad, if not worse, than was predicted. So we need to think of a way that we can carry on growing beet. And you probably know I'm on Twitter and I'm talking to beet farmers regularly. And I had just hearing one thing over and over again. It's like, we've never had it this bad. It doesn't make us money. There's no point in carrying on. They're cancelling their growing contracts. They're scaling back their commitments. Right now, it's survival.
And where's the optimism? Where's it going? Sugar
beet is an amazing, amazing crop. Apart from that first 2-3 months of its life when it's really needy. If it was a child, you'd be a little bit disappointed. It can't really look after itself. You have to kill all the weeds because it doesn't like competition. But once it gets to adolescence, if you like, then it just motors and it can stay in the ground. It just creates sugar. They yields. All the genetics have improved so much that yields in sugar beet have risen 25% in just the last 10 years. As I say, yields of 85 tonnes a hectare are not unusual. And 30, 40 years ago, it was 30 tons. It was like the yields that we get from the virus. So
Wow.
the things have come on so far, and you can do so much with it. It's not just sugar that comes from sugar beet. We make animal feed. There's chemicals in the beet called betaine and raffinose, which are extracted and used in toiletries. It produces bioethanol. You can be a feedstock for biorefineries. In Holland, they make plant protein from the leaves for using in non-meat alternatives.
Okay.
I mean, it's just, and the future holds such, I mean, this stuff could replace crude oil in making plastics or composite materials. There's just such potential. But, you know, I wouldn't want you to think there isn't hope. There is definitely hope. And there's really bright future for it if we can crack it. But at the moment, things are on the edge.
Brilliant. Thank you for that honest appraisal. Let's talk about the Ely Nature Friendly Farming Zone, which is you, along with a load of your neighbours. What is that, and how did it come about?
Right. So Ely Nature Friendly Farming Zone is a group of, now it's grown. It started off much smaller, but now it's around 22, and it could even have grown since I gave you that figure. And it's just farmers in the Ely area who have a wish to demonstrate that we're all committed to at least 3% of our land area being in environmental stewardship.
Yeah.
Most of us have got much more than that, but that's kind of, we need to set the bar somewhere. And we basically do three things. So we learn from each other. As I was talking about the Fens soil, and it's a bit of a unique situation we don't have hedgerows, and a lot of the options on environmental stewardship are kind of tick box, or, you know, it's a fixed menu, and some of them just don't work on our soil. So learning from people who've been doing it from longer and in the same situation just speeds up that learning process. So we're learning from each other. Secondly, we're bringing in outside experts. So we've got Cambridge University down the road. We've had researchers from Cambridge University come in and tell us all about what are the pollinating plants in the Fens, because you know, there's a lot of grass actually.
Yeah.
If you're not careful, it takes over because the soil is so fertile. And so we're learning not just between ourselves, but bringing in outside experts to do that. And thirdly, our aim is to communicate what we're doing, that we can produce food in a nature-friendly way and encourage and enhance the natural environment at the same time as putting food on people's plates to the local population. Grew up in Ely, and, you know, the population of Ely for about 50 or 60 years had been about 10,000 people. Nowadays, it's pushing 25,000 people. And in the old days, you know, a great proportion of the people who live there would have been involved in some way with farming, and that's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
Very few are. And, you know, that is a disconnect between, you know, the fields and the city. You can see that we've got barn owls and red deers and hares and water voles and bitterns and marsh harriers and you know, willow copses and great skies and reed beds, like I was talking about. If we can show them that, because we have to show them that, because it's not obvious if you don't know where to look, and we can make them feel good about local produce being good for the environment as well as tasty and nutritious and all the rest of it, then that is what we'd like to do.
Now, you're also on the NFU's 2040 Net Zero Steering Group, which we've never actually discussed on the podcast yet. So I'm really interested in finding out a bit more. It's a great goal, but is it achievable? And what is the group trying to do?
I am a member of that group. There are lots of other members as well. I wouldn't, everything I'm going to say now is my sort of personal take on it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Speaking NFU policy, and I'm not saying what will happen. And I'm on that board as the Sugar Board's representative on net zero. So that's my role on the board. Although I can't help it, I just get involved with everything. But you're asking. So the ambition, which Minette Batter stood up 18 months ago now at the Oxford Farming Conference, and a bit more than that, and said, well, so the government has already said that by 2050 the whole economy, by law, has to be net zero, which means that any greenhouse gases which we are producing is balanced out by sucking them up somewhere else, so that we're not adding to climate change in terms of adding greenhouse gases. So the whole economy has to do that by 2050. Minette Batters, quite rightly in my view, said that farming can do better than that. And actually, she set the ambition that we would show how farming can be net zero 10 years before that by 2040. And the work the NFU is putting in is demonstrating to government how that can happen, and in a way which farming is brought into, in ways which provide opportunities for farmers. We can shape this program of work, this policy framework, so that farmers get something out of it. There's a risk there, especially the way in the past few years that the whole climate change conversation has been going, that this is another thing where people inspect with a clipboard can come around to every farm and tell us what we're doing wrong. That's not what we want, and this is the way that we're going to stop that happening. And you asked me whether it's achievable. It's a nice goal, it's achievable. I would say it's not just achievable, it's really quite a tame ambition. We are the only industry, the only sector that can absorb carbon out of the atmosphere currently. Anyway, it can absorb carbon out of the atmosphere and put it into our soils or into renewable energy. And to say that we're going to be neutral 10 years before the whole country needs to be neutral, I personally think actually if agriculture sector can't go net negative, then the whole country doesn't stand a hope in hell of going of neutral by 2050. So yes, it's doable. Yes, we can do it. We're trying to show how it is possible. But personally, I believe we can do it much quicker than any other sector, but also quicker than we have pledged to do. If people will listen to us and if they will, work with farmers to design how this can work.
How do you see your business changing and adapting over the next decade, which is surely going to be significant in terms of agricultural change, certainly in terms of policy, but also potentially in terms of markets as well?
Anyone that can give you a firm, definite answer to that question is delusional. Nobody knows.
Everyone could give it a stab, though.
Nobody knows. And this is a serious point because I think there's a sort of, because we've been in the Common Agricultural Policy since 1970-something, and we've had slight changes to the way that agriculture works, on a completely removed schedule from the electoral cycle and what voters are asking for. We have been detached from policy conversations in a way.
Yeah.
What the Agriculture Act was passed last week or this week. And all that, it's a very bare ball document. All it does is give powers to government to decide agricultural policy. Yeah. Everything else you've heard about, all the ELMs, all the public money for public goods, all the productivity grant, that is all busking. It's all solo, guitar solo. It's just whatever the government felt like saying at the time. And that will be the case every time there's an election. It will be up for grabs. It could be turned on its head and we won't know where we are. It's even possible that within the term of a 5-year parliament, the government might change their mind. So we are exposed to change in a way that hasn't been normal for us for generations. But in some ways, that's no different to any other business. But the fact is that we have been dependent and probably will continue to be dependent for a while on government policy. So it's kind of like the NHS or education or the police. We are going to be one of those areas where it's fought over boringly and exhaustingly every time there's a public debate. So what they're saying now, I think there's lots of opportunities. We've got ELMs coming up. We've got the government that's serious or sounds to be serious about climate change. But then on the downside, there's, trade policy, trade deals. We've got Brexit, means great uncertainty. I think just learn to live with that because that is how it's going to be for the next 10 years. If you can make decisions that stand up on their own, more or less regardless of government policy, that's really where farmers have got to focus from now on. So that means standing on our own feet more. A lot of farmers can't do that on their own. So we've got to work together And we've got to look to sort of the models that they have on the continent more of farmer cooperatives, collaborative ventures with farmers, and being more market consumer orientated, because that is going to change less frequently and there'll be less risk than relying on the government and whatever the latest government policy on agriculture is going to be.
What about on your own farm? How does that sense of fluctuation, of change, make you feel right now?
I'm in denial. I'm in denial. I mean, I took on this farm. As I said, we haven't really changed what we do here in a long time. We are below sea level already. So in some ways, the problem might go away because we might be fish farming fairly soon. And that will be a change that's come from outside. But I think you've got to run a decent business. I mean, you've got to know what your costs are. You've got to work out for yourself that you're not eroding what you're living off. So I think that sort of decision stands up in a business sense and for the long term, in whatever the political weather will be, whatever the actual weather will be, hopefully. But then at the same time, you've got to think the unthinkable as well. So I'm thinking now we're below sea level. Potentially, we could be looking at within 5 years at wet agriculture. What crops could we grow in fields that don't dry out or are even under a couple of inches of fresh water? How will that work? I would need my neighbours to be in on that, because in the Fens, it's not just your farm that's drained; it's a whole drainage system. So again, it comes down to what I was saying: it's collaboration, it's knowing the basics of your business and being open-minded as to what the changes may be. The other thing I think we need is people from outside to come in with some more objectivity. Frankly, people who don't know about agriculture and don't know about farming, but are prepared to sort of give their opinions, and we're prepared to listen to see if there's anything in that might help us out. So I think, as I keep saying, change is going to be our bread and butter 10 years, but longer than that too. And we're going to have bigger problems than whatever the latest government policy is to deal with.
We always finish the show with the same two questions. The first one is, if you had a message for the public, what would it be and why?
Thank you for listening. Thank you for buying food and caring about the environment. And we are not probably what you might think. Whether your vision, your idea of us is from the storybook, we're not the farmer with the dungarees chewing the piece of corn with a cow and a pig and a sheep and a duck in a bed barn in front of a pudding bowl hill. But we do other really interesting stuff, and I'm really glad you're interested. And we're not the evil slayers of nature either. So, hello, and talk to us, get involved, come and find out what we're doing and give us some ideas. That would be what I'd say.
Brilliant. And finally, a message for your fellow farmers.
Well done. Well done, everybody. We've done a brilliant job so far. It's going to get rough. The world is not against us. We should have confidence, and we can get on with this. And again, if we work together, we can shape a better world. And actually, we're better placed than many people to do so.
Well, we'll leave it there. But Tom, thanks so much for coming on. It's been really good to meet you, virtually at least.
Yes, you too.
I'm sure that's your sense of optimism will infiltrate itself throughout the sector, and hopefully we'll all be fine for the next 10 years.
Let's hope so.
It's Farmer Focus.
Cambridgeshire farmer Tom Clarke. Next time, I'm heading back to Wales again, and I'll be speaking with first-generation farmer Alex Heffron, who farms in Pembrokeshire. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, and you can also follow the show on Instagram or Twitter at @MTF_podcast. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.